Hello everyone, my name is Don the Movie Reviewer, and today we're going to be talking about Brad Pitt starring in Ad Astra.
Please state your mission objective.
I am attempting to stop an uncontrolled antimatter reaction, which threatens our entire solar system. Spacecom believes my father is responsible.
The world awaits our discovery, my son.
Now, before I saw this movie called Ad Astra starring Brad Pitt, I did not know what the word Ad Astra meant until after I saw this movie, and I looked it up on Google because Google knows everything. Apparently, Ad Astra is a Latin phrase meaning to the stars. And within this Ad Astra movie starring Brad Pitt, at the very beginning, there is some text that you are supposed to read. And within that text, there is a message in there that does say to the stars. Ad Astra is a movie starring Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt plays Roy McBride. Roy McBride is an astronaut who has to hide his personal feelings and emotions deep within himself in order to accomplish whatever mission is put in front of him. During one of Roy's missions, there is a power surge which is catastrophic. It is believed that Roy's father, played by Tommy Lee Jones, is responsible for these catastrophic power surges. The company that Roy works for wants to use him to lure his father out so they can fix the power surge situation at hand. Now, as the story progresses in this movie, there are numerous things in here that I enjoy. Number one being the director James Gray capturing the inner emotions with the Roy character played by Brad Pitt here. There are some scenes in here that do play out like they did in Blade Runner 2049 with Ryan Gosling's character.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells. Interlinked. What's it like to hold the hand of someone you love? Interlinked.
There is an inner struggle going on with Brad Pitt's character. I enjoyed the story, the emotional story in this movie about Roy wanting to reconnect with his father. He doesn't know exactly where his real emotions lie within his self because he's been disciplined to behave a certain way. And it's not until all of those emotions from the past flood back into his state of mind is when he realizes that, hey, this is my father, and, I can't remember my father's mistakes from the past, and so, I need to forgive him and move on. So I like the emotional journey that Roy was going through here in connection with his father.
Dad, I'd like to see you again.
Also, I loved being put in the position of Brad Pitt's character here because there's that scene where the power surge happens and Roy is smack dead in the middle of it. He's witnessing everything happening, and the director puts us in Roy's perspective. We get the POV shot, and he's falling and he's twirling and passes out, and I felt emotionally engaged with that moment. It put me on the edge of my seat. The director captured that moment perfectly in putting me in the emotional perspective of the character, not only mentally, but physically. And with all of those things that I did enjoy in this movie, there were a couple of things that I did not enjoy. The narration. It was constant, it was too on the nose, it made things too obvious, it was too in your face, it was they did it too much. At the beginning of this movie, the narration kind of made sense because I assumed it was all in his head. Because at the beginning, he's talking to himself and I'm saying to myself, well, you know, sometimes narration works, sometimes it doesn't. And at the beginning, it didn't work for me. But then there's a moment when he's talking and he's walking through this corridor, and in his mind, he says, "Don't touch me." And this is in the middle of him delivering narration to the audience. And I don't like narration because then it just makes this feel like a movie to me when I'm supposed to be sucked into it, but it takes me out of it. But then I enjoyed the narration because then he says that line, "Don't touch me," while he's delivering his narration on how he feels and his emotions. So when he said that, "Don't touch me," I'm like, okay, he's saying this in his mind. Then the movie goes along and he keeps doing narration. It keeps going and it keeps happening. And I'm one of those people who prefers the show me and don't tell me method. What I mean by the show me, don't tell me method is I prefer to see a collection of images that illustrate the story. So then as an audience member, without you explaining things to me, I can follow along and kind of make up my own interpretation as to what's going on, even though it's obvious because you're delivering it in images versus giving me narration and explaining things away to me, like spoon feeding me information, as they call it. And especially when you already are showing the images. So if you're showing the images along with the narration, it just makes me feel confused. And then I get frustrated because then I'm like, well, you don't need to talk during these scenes because I can see clearly what's happening. I can see the emotion on Brad Pitt's character's face of how he feels and how he feels sad and how he's dealing with this inner turmoil. But then he has to talk about it and explain that, oh yeah, I feel this way and I feel that way. And I'm like, dude, that scene that felt like Blade Runner 2049 was great. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do in order to explain where his emotional state is. And then Brad Pitt, fantastic performance on delivering that emotion of him trying to be stoic, but then yet feeling internally sad. I thought the expression on his face was great. It illustrated it perfectly. He didn't need the narration to explain that. So like I said, it felt too on the nose to me. It was too obvious. It was spoon feeding me all this stuff that didn't need to be there. The narration just annoyed me. It annoyed the hell out of me in this movie. I really do not like narration in some movies. There's some movies that have really good narration, like Forrest Gump. And the reason why I think Forrest Gump narration is great is because he's sitting on the bench and he's talking to people. He's not talking directly to the audience. That's what I don't like about narration, is because they talk directly to the audience. And within this, it seemed like it was in his head at first, but then they just went on and on with it, explaining things that were already shown to me or things that I can clearly see. So it just felt annoying to me, and it kind of took me out of the movie and made me roll my eyes in certain moments.
As I sat there, my eyes squinting intensely, I realized that the shit was stuck in my asshole, and there was nothing I could do about it.
And then on top of that, along with the narration bothering me, I didn't know what to feel emotionally during certain scenes. Like there is an action scene in this movie that feels like Mad Max in space, and they're on these rovers and there's this chase going on, and then Brad Pitt, gives some narration saying, "What the fuck am I doing here?" And it made me laugh because I'm like, okay, this scene's supposed to be intense and it's serious, life or death. But then Brad Pitt explains, like, what the fuck am I doing here? And it's like, oh, some shit's about to go down. And it just made me laugh. It took me out of the movie. So then the scene felt goofy. And then they're driving around like, oh, it's Mad Max in space. Now this is an action movie. And it didn't feel real to me or serious to me until one of the astronauts got shot in the face. And I'm like, okay, this is extremely violent. People are getting killed. But before that, it wasn't intense to me. I didn't feel any suspense. The narration ruined it for me and made me laugh at this supposedly intense scene. And another thing that bothers me about this movie is that at first the story feels like it's kind of all over the place. Like at the, act one of the movie, it starts off being like, some 2001 A Space Odyssey with some interesting visuals, and it feels like the visuals are going to deliver the story, but then the narration sneaks in and kind of ruins everything for me. And then it also felt like it was going to be some under the skin, made by Jonathan Glazer kind of movie where, yeah, you got the images and they're going to explain the story, and it did it at first, but then the narration, like I said, came in and ruined everything. And then it also felt like some Interstellar stuff, you know, like the visual effects in here, fantastic. And it delivered that emotional depth with how rich the cinematography was, along with the characters within those moments. It all came together really well. But then by the second act of the movie, the story goes all over the place. Like I said, it turns into some Mad Max in space action movie. Then later it turns into a horror movie when some baboons show up and start killing people. And I'm like, did I miss a scene? Did I miss something? Where'd these baboons come from? How did they get on the ship? I'm dumb. I missed something. Now this is a horror movie, you know? And then there's this little comedy sprinkled in here too. And then there's just too much narration, you know? And so like the second act is kind of jumbled, and it's like, okay, just focus on the emotional depth and the mission and get rid of the narration and just focus on Roy trying to find his father. We don't need all this like action stuff and this horror stuff. It's all over the place for me. And then you reach the third act of the movie. Now, the third act of the movie starts off pretty good, because then you got Brad Pitt's character trying to get to his father. I'm emotionally invested in his progression, trying to get to his father and him dealing with his inner emotions and going through that journey. And then, you know, he has to do something horrific in order to, you know, accomplish his own mission. And, you know, he's struggling with that a little bit. So I'm emotionally invested in all of this, even though during the middle portion, it does feel like a bunch of random stuff is occurring and it does feel a bit silly. But by the end, I say to myself, you know what? It's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. Overall, my verdict for this movie is it's good. It's a good movie. The acting in here is stellar all across the board. I do enjoy the directing here from James Gray. The visual effects in here are fantastic. I do enjoy the director putting me within the physical realm of the character. I also enjoy Brad Pitt's character's emotional journey here, of him having that inner struggle with his emotions because the company he works for is trying to discipline him. And then also his discipline and his career of choice being connected to his father, Tommy Lee Jones here. I like that inner emotional struggle. And with that being said, the only negative things here, the big one for me, is the narration. Like I said, it's just too obvious. It's too on the nose. It's too much spoon feeding. It's too much illustrating things that you can tell me visually. And that's all I have to say. So as always, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?